Greetings everyone, Brad here with Mild Mannered EDC. Today we're going to be doing a classic Mild Mannered review of the Reate Tribute. Look at this, huh? Is that one classy knife or what? Yeah, very, very cool knife. Big thank you and shout out to Nick over at Pacific Standard Time. That is his Instagram handle. Go check him out. Really cool guy. Really appreciate his support here on the channel, and obviously it's just fun to chat with over on Instagram. But he sent me this along with a Kaiser Feist as well. Actually, I hadn't had a chance to check out a Feist yet, so I was really excited to have that opportunity. So really appreciate Nick doing that. So thank you, sir. And yeah, please go check him out. Give him a follow. He's a good dude. So thank you for that. We're going to take a look at this Reate Tribute today, and we will do, as I said, a classic mild mannered review, but we'll talk some specs first, and then we'll do a few size comparisons, and then we'll get underway. I've been pretty impressed with this knife overall, so this is going to be a pretty darn positive review. Not to spoil it for you right out of the gate, but yeah, I think it's worth watching. There's a lot of cool stuff on this knife, and I think it shows Reate, well, I think it shows them flexing a little bit. Not that they need to prove a lot of that. For those of you that know Reate, or maybe you don't, they are a Chinese knife manufacturer, but they are arguably, I think, you know, if not the best, one of the best, the very best sort of pocket knife manufacturers out there right now coming out of China. They are not generally inexpensive, and this is no exception to that, but they just do really, really excellent work. And this knife, in a lot of ways, is kind of epitomizes that, I think. It's just, you know, from tip to tail done really, really well. So, okay. Let's go ahead and get underway with this with some specs on this Reate Tribute. So we've got a blade length here of 2.75. So not the biggest blade ever, right? Pretty compact. But certainly not the smallest blade either. You know, certainly not the smallest blade I have in my collection anyways. We've got a blade thickness here of 0.12 inches. I found one thing online that said 0.13, and that just felt too thick, and so I checked it, and it is about just 0.12. Handle length on this, so if you're just talking pure handle, so just the scales, you've got 3.875 inches. If you include the little front flipper tab here, you're closer just to 4 inches right on the money. And then handle thickness, it is a bit thicker than it looks, actually. It is a little over half an inch at 0.53, which normally I prefer at least half an inch or below, but you know, it's because of its just general small size and compactness, you don't really notice that too much, but there you go. And so overall, when this is all opened up tip to tail, you've got a 6.65 inch knife weighing in at 3.08 ounces. So like I said, pretty compact, but kind of a lot going on at the same time, and a very, very interesting knife on a lot of levels. So there we go. How about a few size comparisons here? We have got the Tribute. How about another front flipper, one of my favorites, a little more on the budget side, and that is the Real Steel Metamorph. There you go, so you can see how that stacks up. How about a Ontario Rat number 1? There you go. So you can see it's definitely a small knife in terms of, you know, looking at it between the Metamorph and this Spidey Rat. And then how about a classic mild-mannered Swiss Army knife. There you go. So it's, you know, maybe just a little bigger than that. Obviously the blade's bigger, but it's definitely in that territory, which is kind of interesting. So there we go. There's just a few size comparisons for those of you that like that. All right, let's go ahead and get into this mild-mannered review. When we do this kind of classic review, we'll talk about the blade and the action, the scales and hardware, and then we'll finish with ergos and carry, and then maybe just some summary thoughts and that sort of thing. So, blade. Here we go. We have a drop point blade on here, and this is quite just a beautiful blade. I mean, I'm a clip point, drop point fan in general, and so this one really checks that box. It's really, really done nicely. It is an M390 steel. You can see that right there, if my hand gets out of the way. You've got this flat sort of stone wash, or I saw one somewhere, I saw it described as a frosted satin. Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely kind of a mix in between those two. I would kind of go more on the satin side, but there you go. It depends on where you look. On the flats here, it is more of a brushed look though, but on the swedge, and that is a very nice swedge, by the way. And the actual, you know, grind primary bevel here, you've got, yeah, that more of a satiny look. So there you go. Overall, not much in terms of blade marking, little Reate logo, as well as I mentioned, that M390, but that's about it. Everything is chamfered very, very nicely, so there's no sharp edges or anything like that. This edge is super slicey. I don't know if I can show you that all that well. I mean, it's obviously ground beautifully. And that's really something that I know Reate does very, very well. Although they have in the past had a tendency to maybe do some thick grinds or a little bit fatter behind the edge. This, I think, measured when I did it on my calipers. And I'm not the best at that.
That is true.
So I could be a little off. Came out to about 10,000th behind the edge. So anywhere between 10 and 15, depending on how steady I could hold my hand. So, and maybe that's a big variance to you. But for me, that just... all that means is this is very, very slicey. So I liked that a lot. And you can tell when you're cutting with it. I mean, it's just a super, super slicey knife. So, you know, pretty compact blade, but definitely giving you some flat, nice bit of belly there. Beautiful blade. Lots to like about that. All right, action. So this is a front flipper, right? We talked about that. What's cool about that is, you know, it's just a little different. And front flippers, you know, this has really been the last year or so, I think, you know, in knife production. Not only have knives gotten a little smaller, it seems. That was certainly the 2020 trend. We'll see if that continues here in 2021. But front flipping has really become very, very popular, and people really scrambling for a lot of front flipper knives. So we're seeing more and more of that out in there, which is cool, because I actually think it's a really nice alternative to, you know, the standard thumb studs or flipper tab, that sort of thing. You always have spiders go with their little spidey hole, so you know it's but yeah, it's just a nice, I'm glad to see as many of them out there on the market, because I think they're pretty fun. What's interesting about this knife, and this is maybe one of the better front flippers I've encountered in terms of its ability to open, is you can sort of do this reach around with your index finger.
Oh my.
Yeah, reach around, and there you go. Works just beautifully like that. Or you can do the traditional kind of with your thumb. And you know, both are perfectly comfortable, very easy. Neither of them require sort of any weird motion with your finger or anything like that to make it to make that work. So, you know, from an action standpoint, it's fantastic. This has a very, very nice detent on it. And normally, you know, sometimes detents that can be tuned for front flipping can be a little soft. This one is, boy, it's you're not shaking this out, let me tell you. And I tried. Not that that's always a metric for, you know, good or bad, but yeah, it's got a really, really good detent. And in terms of fall shuttiness or just smoothness overall, very, very smooth. So from an action standpoint, really a lot to like there. Now, it is running on caged ball bearings. You can't really see them in there, but yeah, trust me, that's what it's doing there. And it is a liner lock. You can see that here. And we've got about a 30% lock up there. Zero blade play, zero blade rock, none of that. I mean, this is built extremely well, and the tolerances are quite tight. So there you go. So that's sort of what we have with action there. I think it's really a really excellent front flipper. Maybe one of the best that I've handled in terms of kind of just ease of front flipperitude. If that's a word. Yeah. So I like that really a lot. Now let's talk about scales and hardware here, and this is where I'm going to mention the price. So this knife costs about $262 is what I've seen it out there. That's a lot of money. That's a chunk of change, especially for a knife that isn't that big. You know, you're talking about a 2.75 inch, you know, less than 7 inch overall knife, but it's got some really, and it, you know, so apart from just how well it's put together and the blade being as nice and action, etc., you've got a really, really high quality materials being done here. Not only are they high quality, but they're done at a really high level. So, you know, overall, we've got sort of 3 materials on this knife. We've got carbon fiber, which you can see. We've got titanium in the backspacer and the liners and the clip, in fact. And then you've got zirconium here in the bolsters, which is a really, really cool touch. And zirconium, you know, that can be very expensive. I mean, you put like a Zirc clip on, you know, something on a pen or something, and all of a sudden it goes up by $100, you know, or whatever. But, you know, so I personally, and I know $262 is really a lot of money, and I don't want to say that it's not for a pocket knife, especially one this size. But I think with these levels of material, yeah, I mean, and maybe even a fourth. I don't know if that's an anodized titanium in that brass pivot right there, or if that's actual brass, or, you know, I don't know exactly, but it is sort of a black brass color there. Sorry, folks. So yeah, I mean, just that alone, I think, is really interesting, that mix of materials. But it's not often you see the titanium relegated into the liners, right? Yeah, done really, really beautifully. And then on top of that, it's all just executed. There's no transition. I mean, there's just, yeah. So for me, it's the materials. I mean, apart from a really nice blade and a great action, the materials I think are really what are justifying the cost for this, on this for me, in terms of not only justifying the cost, but also, or in terms of not just the materials, but sort of how well they executed the materials. So it's just beautifully done. Now, these screws a little bit, you kind of go, that sort of breaks up the lines of what is a very, very classy looking knife. Yeah, maybe. That's up to you, you know. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder, I guess, as well as this lanyard hole. Would have been nice to see that integrated somehow into the back spacer, but you know, it's there if you want it, but it's also out of the way, I guess, on some level. But yeah, that's what you've got. You know, they could have maybe skeletonized these liners. Even the titanium there, would that have saved some weight? I don't know, maybe. Maybe just enough to get it, you know, under 3 ounces or something, but you know, no harm, no foul there really, in general. So that's what we've got here on Scales and Hardware. And I think from my view, you know, some of the nicer I've seen on a knife. So let's talk ergos and carry. So, you know, as I mentioned, small knife, but I don't have the smallest hands. I don't have huge hands, but, you know, I've got some meaty, you know, somewhat meaty paws here, if not Shrek-like paws.
Oh, really?
And, you know, I'm very, very comfortable in this knife for being a little knife or a smaller knife, you know, either in a hammer grip or in this, you know, kind of this position, saber grip or whatever that's called. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't have any problem with the ergos at all. It's very, very comfortable. And in fact, not only is it comfortable, it sort of just melts into your hand. And I mentioned that a little bit in action, I think, where I said, you know, you can flip either and you don't find yourself in an awkward position after you do that. And it's true. The knife just sort of naturally wants to fit into your hand in a really nice way. So, you know, from an ergo standpoint, great. And I don't get any hot spots off this clip or anything like that. So, yeah, very, very cool. From a carry standpoint, you know, it is not a deep carry clip. As you can see there, you're going to have about this much sticking up, but it's a classy little bit that's sticking up there, right? So not deep carry, so maybe you like that, maybe you don't. It's not a ambidextrous knife in terms of the clip, right? It is just right side tip up only, so there's that as well. But by and large, it carries beautifully in the pocket. Again, like I said, I think it feels a little heavy sometimes just for its size, but you know, that's neither here nor there maybe. And maybe some people like that, right? They like the affirmation of a heavier item, right? It's like, even for a smaller knife, maybe it gives you a little more control. I don't know. Something to think about. Let me know down in the comments maybe if I'm just, you know, off my rocker on that one, which wouldn't be the first time, but there you go. So what do we have overall on this? You know, it's designed by a guy named Jack Chen, apparently, is what I saw online. You know, who's that? I have no idea. But I probably should have looked him up a little more before I did this review, but I just sort of saw it kind of last minute. Overall, this is a great knife. This definitely gets the designation from me, and I don't give these out on my channel very often, but this is a mild-mannered masterpiece. That's right. This reaches that for me. Not the biggest knife in the world, not the cheapest knife in the world, but really, really well made, well done, really classy, and just one that I'm really glad to have been able to have a chance to check out. You know, I would like to buy one, and maybe would enjoy having one in my collection, but right now it's just not really in the cards. But overall, beautiful knife, and I really appreciate Nick Levin getting me a chance to take a look at it here. So that's my review here on the Reate Tribute. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this knife gives you something to think about if you haven't checked out Reate before. And as I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but Reate, you know, does a lot of OEM work for designers and collabs where, you know, a designer might want to take one of his custom knives and do it into a production mode. And so they do a lot of that. But this is just one of their in-house designs, and I think they're just showing that, you know, they don't need an outside designer necessarily to tell them how to make a good knife, or how to at least design one, because they definitely designed this very, very well and executed it equally well. So there you go. Big positive here on the Reate Tribute. I hope you've enjoyed this review. Stay safe out there. Be mild-mannered to one another. And all the best.